And to my far right is a special guest, MLB Network insider Jon Morosi. He's here to talk about Patrick Kane on the Red Wings.
I believe so. Debut tomorrow. It's all in the original six family, Kevin. But Kevin, Herb, Vinny, great to be with you guys. Great to talk some White Sox baseball, winter meetings baseball. Always a pleasure, guys. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, thanks for stopping by. It's been an interesting winter meetings. I think that's a relative term, but for the White Sox purposes, we came in here thinking about Dylan Cease. What would the market look like? What would the White Sox want to get from him? What would other teams be willing to give up for him? What have you heard about Dylan Cease as you've walked around the hotel here?
Very popular name. And I think the distinction between Dylan Cease and Corbin Burns and Shane Bieber as well is the years of control. In the case of Cease, it's 2, and with Burns, it's 1, and with Bieber, it's 1. With Glass now, it's 1. Mm-hmm. So I think because of that value component, the 2 years really is crucial. And I think you look as well, and I made this point, we were talking back and forth on MLB Network recently about how he would set up. If Dylan Cease were a free agent right now, if you were to look at his last 2 years and compare them to Aaron Nola's last 2 years, especially when you group in Cease's 2022, he's better. And so when you think about Aaron Nola signing for $175 million, it tells you there's a lot of value in what Dylan Cease does. There's a lot of industry interest in what he's able to do with his swing and miss, with his youth, pretty good track record of staying healthy. So for all those reasons, he's a very appealing player. And so I think, like a lot of things this week, and stop me if you've heard this before, but some folks are waiting on Ohtani and Yamamoto to see just how desperate they are to get Dylan Cease. So, for example, the Dodgers, if the Dodgers don't get Ohtani, and if they don't get Yamamoto, and maybe if they don't get one of the top free agents as well in that upper echelon, then a trade becomes very palatable. And if you're given the choice, I do think the Dodgers would prefer to have someone for 2 years, because if you look at the Dodgers rotation, it's not just a 1 year need. They actually need guys for a while. If you look at their playoff rotation when they were winning the World Series, for example, a lot of those names are gone. And so they need to replenish that. Kershaw's not getting any younger. So for all those reasons, I think getting Cease for 2 years for a team like the Dodgers, the Braves would also fit in the same category. The Giants fit in the same category. There's a lot of teams out there. The Orioles are another one with their great base of prospects. So I think the White Sox can and should dream a little bit on what they can get for him, because the interest in him is simply that strong.
Chris Getz and Josh Barfield both told us this week, John, that they don't think they have urgency to trade Dylan Cease, that they don't think they need to trade Dylan Cease. If that's the case and they are willing to be patient and wait for the right offer, how about the other teams? What sort of urgency is there from other teams? Obviously, you laid out, some of the mechanics that are going on right now. But once we get to that stage, what is the urgency of some of these other teams to trade for Dylan Cease versus trading away Dylan Cease?
It's a great point, Vinny. And I think a big part of that is you think about the dynamics of the offseason versus the in-season. And I remember a long time ago, a GM once told me, John, if I'm going to trade a position player, the best time to trade a position player is in the offseason, because you've got every GM has some maneuverability in his or her roster to make some changes. We're seeing this unfold in real time today with Juan Soto and the Yankees. There you go. A 1 year position player. The better time to trade Soto for the Padres was now and not in July. The difference with pitching is that right now, if Chris Getz calls up the Braves and says, hey, I need your 1 and 2 and 3 prospect, Alex Anthopoulos could say, wait a minute, I've got this entire list of free agent pitchers that I can sift through. Why would I do that right now? But in July, he can't say that. In July, there's no option to say, well, I'm gonna go to the free agent market, because it doesn't exist. And so for that purpose, I do think the mechanics of the marketplace do suggest that moving him in July is a very valid plan, especially if you believe, and this is, I think, where you have to trust your baseball staff, medical staff. If Chris Getz, Josh Barfield say to themselves, we believe there's more in there than what he gave us in 23, and that his value is going to come up in the first half of the season. And if it does, then you're trading him to a team for 2 pennant races. And that team, by the way, has already proven itself for a couple months to be a contender, at which point in time, maybe you're a bit more willing to make that deal. So I think they can be patient. And that's one of the reasons why I really like the move they made with Bummer, because they were able to bank a good return with major league players who, if things go well health-wise, potentially account for 40% of your rotation with one trade for a reliever when you're probably not going to be competing for a World Series. Like that's almost always the right strategy. And I think we saw a really good first move of the Getz, Barfield, Giannis, Gene Watson administration.
The White Sox did make a move for a starting pitcher. And how's the signing of Erick Fedde, who is the KBO MVP, Cy Young, viewed on the outside?
So, Herb, it's a great question. I think it's a great strategy by the White Sox. You have to think outside the box a little bit. You got to be a little bit different, because you're not going to be able to compete 1-for-1 for Shohei Ohtani. You're not going to get him.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be a little imaginative. And I give them credit for understanding the market. Fedde is someone who, like Merrill Kelly, went over to KBO, changed his repertoire, changed his methodology, picked up a new pitch, and has become a different pitcher. So I like that strategy. I like it too, because you're bringing in someone who is adaptable by nature. He picked up his life and moved to Korea and then came back. I'm always impressed by people that take that leap of faith to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no surprise that you've seen players come back, whether it's Miles Michaelis, Nick Martinez, Brooks Raley, Merrill Kelly, and have success, because you mature so much when you do that. So I think that Fedde's repertoire is better. I think he's going to be a more composed pitcher than he was the first time he was over with the Nationals. And he's a great find. I look at him as being a solid mid-rotation starter. And I think that it's exactly what the White Sox need. You watch them more closely than I did, certainly last year. And they just needed like a raft in the water to say, okay, here's like, I'm secure here. I know who I know what I'm going to get from this player in this position. They didn't have a lot of that last year. And I think that Fedde is someone that is one of those rafts, one of those life preservers that that he'll give you what you're hoping for. And I think that's a very welcome change for what the last couple of years of the White Sox has been.
A lot of talk, obviously, about Cease before the meetings, during the meetings. Chris Getz told us on Monday, not very likely that they're going to move Luis Robert Jr. unless he's really blown away.
Right.
What do you think the odds are, the chances are that they could move Yoan Moncada or Eloy Jimenez, two guys who obviously are due some big pay raises in 2024? But Chris said last night they'd be open-minded to paying down something if the deal made sense. Is there interest in either of those guys out there?
I think there is, but again, the unfortunate part is, for the White Sox, so many of their players just had uncharacteristic seasons and inconsistent seasons that it's hard to have a player as talented as Moncada or Eloy and trade them now. Now, they may have to do it, because I think there is a financial reality that the White Sox have to acknowledge, and you can't afford everybody. And yet you look at the free agent market right now, you've got Jorge Soler, JD Martinez, Justin Turner. You've got some bats that are kind of similar in profile, at least to Eloy. And then with Moncada, there's maybe not a ton of middle infielders. But again, the corners, it depends on how you view Moncada. I tend to look at him mostly as a third baseman now. But Jamer Candelario is there. Gio Urshela is there. Who's a great defender. Matt Chapman's on the free agent market. So there are enough comparables, again, to where I think the White Sox probably would have to pay down that contract and find a team that really needs a bat and says, okay, we'll probably pay down this deal, or maybe we'll package them together, or we'll take on one of your contracts, whatever it might be. But I do think some creativity is going to be required. And where I think the White Sox are in a better position right now than they've been in a long time is there is continuity in how they're operating. Like Chris Getz, I've known him really throughout his professional baseball career. Very impressed by Chris, not just because he went to Michigan. He's just he's a great executive and a great guy. So in the past, and this, there were a lot of different spheres of influence. Was this a Kenny decision? Was this a Rick decision? Did they agree on this? Did they not? All of that now is gone. And I think it's more of a Chris likes this move. Josh Barfield likes this move. Gene Watson, who knows talent as well as anybody in the game, likes this move. We in agreement? Okay, let's do it. And that's it. And I think that there were probably a lot of opportunities that the White Sox, and it was no one's fault really specifically, but they missed on stuff because they couldn't make a decision when you have to make quick decisions. And I think that the current structure of the front office, I think White Sox fans will be very pleased at just the way they can be nimble. They made a significant trade right away in the offseason. That I don't think would have happened in recent years. And I just think it's emblematic of a team that's humming right now in terms of its overall collaboration and chemistry as a front office.
Obviously, a lot of Kansas City flavor
Yes.
with the White Sox. You tweeted in the last hour that the White Sox and Whit Merrifield, who has been spotted around the Opryland Hotel
Yes.
this week, could be an excellent match in free agency. Do you actually see that coming together?
Yes, I think that whether he lands on the south side or not, I think it's going to be a really good fit. And I think the White Sox will be one of those teams that's in there at the end. I don't know exactly where it stands in terms of the conversations, negotiations, if he's already had an offer or anything like that. I just see the fit. And he knows Pedro Grifol. He knows Chris Getz. I happen to think Pedro is going to be really effective in this year as a year two as a manager. I've always been a big fan of his, and I just think it's set up well. He knows the people around him. He's known Chris forever. He's known Gene Watson forever. It's more his team now, I think.
Sure.
And so I look at Whit. If you're able to bring him in, Whit is a high character guy, great clubhouse guy who wants to be a great second baseman. I think he's already shown he can play defense there. He puts the ball in play. He does a lot of things that are valuable in the game now. And I did go back, like trip down memory lane. I said to myself, how many times have I come to these meetings and wondered who the White Sox are going to have to play second base? And I went back and with the genius of Baseball Reference, I searched for all the players that the White Sox have had that have started 100 games at second base. And the last one, I mentioned this in a tweet, the last one that had a 100 plus OPS plus, meaning league average or better offensive player was ALLCITY Ramirez in 2008. So that position for a decade and a half has been objectively below average, like for 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
I said on the air like yesterday, just sort of like spitballing ideas. I said, man, like they haven't had a really great second baseman since Tateguchi. And then and sure enough, like it was on that list, it was Ramirez and then Iguchi. I was like, I wasn't off by too far.
Probably Ray Durham.
Right. Yeah. Ray Durham before him. Exactly. I mean, that's what we're talking about. So I think they're due to have some good news at second base, and Whit would be good news.
We all silly like the mayor.